When Canto 4 closed, we had seen how Umbriel journeys to the cave of spleen. And the fundamental idea of Canto 4 was to talk about female hysteria, and in doing so, present uh, a reverse or a binary of the bright, lighted world
Dada, I
of.
can't see the screen.
Oh, you can't see the screen. Uh, Now, is it visible?
Yes, Dada, now it's visible.
Right, right. The idea was to present a binary of the well lighted, uh, bright world of cantos 1 to 3 with the world of migraine, with the world of depression, with the world of affectation that we had in Canto 4. Canto 4 also marked the presence of not only Umbriel, the gnome, and the journey into the deeper recesses of the depressed female mind. It also gave us an idea of the militant Amazonian woman, especially Thalestris. And therefore, we had a woman who was in the throes of either depression and chaotic rage, or uh, a certain degree of antagonism and violence. Now, the problem now lies with Pope is how does he end this poem? How does he laugh the people out of their quarrel, as it were, through his wit? And how does he take the poem to a climax? As I pointed out, the poem has two climaxes. The first climax was with the cutting off of the lock of hair, and this was uh, approximately, not approximately, actually in Canto 3. And the second climax will be the ultimate battle between Belinda and Lord Peter, and the resolution of the poem. How does one with whom does the lock of the hair go to? Now, also remember that Pope in his 1717 edition will be adding a particularly important speech to the Rape of the Lock, delivering the moral of the poem, and this will be done through Clarissa. So there are two things that I want to concentrate here on. The first is the moral motive of the poem through the speech of Clarissa, added in 1717. And the other is the conclusion of the poem, including the battle royal that takes place, and how Pope keeps on this art of what I've called trivializing the epic through the mock heroic, feminizing the epic through the use of metaphors and objects from the female world, and aestheticizing the epic by sort of adding a dash of beauty and sublimity to the mock heroic. This was our rubric, and this is the rubric that Pope also follows in Canto 5. It is with those lines then that I move on to the text. She said the pitying audience melt in tears, but fate and Jove had stopped the baron's ears. In vain Thalestris with reproach assails, for who can move when fair Belinda fails? Not half so fixed the Trojan could remain, while Anna begged and Dido raged in vain. Now, the allusion here is to Enid, where Dido sort of begs Enos not to leave her, and her entreaties are supported by her sister Anna. Therefore, the question is that just as Dido and Anna begged Enos not to leave Dido, similarly, Belinda and Thalestris plead that the hair be returned to Belinda. So this is once again the epic and the mock heroic functioning together. Then grave Clarissa graceful waved her fan, silence ensued, and then the nymph began. Now this is important because we'll talk about Clarissa's role in a separate lecture maybe, but we've already seen that Clarissa is the inferior priestess, the maid, inferior in both in beauty and in class, and that Clarissa had a very naughty role to play. in the sense that she has handed over the scissors to the Baron to cut off Belinda's lock of hair. So Clarissa's role is a rather complex role in the poem. It is not an easy role in that sense of the term. So what does Clarissa have to say? But remember, at this point of time, we are talking of a slightly different Clarissa, somebody who Pope uses as a figurehead to talk about the moral of the text. And this is one of the most important segments of the text. Say, why are beauties praised and honored most? Now, this speech, by the way, you will have to remember, is what is a parody of another epic speech. And this epic speech was delivered by Sarpedon to Patroclus when the Trojan War was going on. And Sarpedon actually delivers the speech as a speech of noblesse oblige. This, please mark this term, noblesse, Noblesse, oblige. It means that, the nobility and privileges of nobility come with responsibility. That the nobility will have to display, especially in this case, the warriors will have to display their honor and bravery on the field. Right. So the entire point about the speech is that in Sarpedon's speech is that the nobility is obliged to display honor. So the entire speech in Homer is about honor and honor of the nobility. What Clarissa will do is she will transform this to this question of good behavior and good honor of the woman. So once again, a classical epic speech is being transformed into a mock heroic, feminizing it by applying the condition of honor of the nobility to good honor of the woman, good nature of the woman. But this is a very clever speech, mind you. What does Clarissa say? Say, why are beauties praised and honored most? The wise man's passion and the vain man's toast. Why angel called, an angel, why decked with all that land and sea afford? We've already seen how Belinda's dressing table is marked by objects plundered from different lands. So why is woman decked with what land and sea can afford? Why angels called, an angel like adored? Why round our coaches crowd the white-gloved beaux? Beaux are the handsome young men. So why are women so revered? Why are women extremely looked up to? Why bows the side box from its inmost rows? So in the theater, this is the reference to the theater. In the theater, the woman would sit in the middle, in the front boxes, while the beaux, the young men, would sit in the side boxes, so that the woman would be on display and the men could look upon them. And then comes the moral part. How vain are all these glories, all our pains. So how vain are all these glories and our pains, pains of makeup and glories of being always attended to. That unless good sense preserve, what beauty gains. So what Clarissa is doing is prioritizing good sense over beauty, saying that beauty can attract, but only through good sense can we retain control, or we can retain this attention. that men may say, when we the front box grace, behold the first in virtue as in face. Now, this links once again with the idea that true beauty lay in virtue rather than physical beauty. If you want, you can go to Byron's very short poem, She Walks in Beauty, is the poem that Byron writes. And Byron talks about the beauty of virtue triumphing over the beauty of the face. Interestingly, this is Mary Astle. Mary Astle talks about the mutable, unstable a thing as beauty of a face, which 1,000 accidents may destroy. But in a wit, good humor, and other graces of the mind, as well as of the beauty, our love is more durable and constant in the proportion to the longer continuance of those qualities in the object. This is an essay in defense of the female sex, 1696. So the contemporary idea was that the woman should be marked or should prioritize good sense, good behavior more than just beauty. Now remember, Belinda has been just taking affectations, is putting on all her charms and depending on her beauty. Clarissa is suggesting that she should rather combine beauty with good sense. And you see the context. If she has lost her hair, she can use good sense to trap the baron into marriage. So, says, unless good sense preserve what beauty gains, that men may say when we the front box grace, behold the first in virtue as in face. Oh, if to dance all night and dress all day, charm the smallpox or chased old age away. So, what are the two great threats to beauty? One obviously is old age, right, which creates wrinkles and sort of destroys your former beauty. And the other, of course, was this great disease of the 18th century, smallpox, which had no cure at that point of time and could render you extremely ugly in that sense of the term. In fact, please remember that smallpox was a devastating disease until and unless the vaccine was found ultimately, and that Lord Peter himself will die subsequently out of smallpox. So, oh, if to dance all night and dress all day, charm the smallpox or chased old age away. Who would not scorn what housewife scares produce? So why would somebody want to become a housewife? All people would always party if you could always be young. Or who would learn one earthly thing of use? To patch the ogle might become a saint, to patch, to put on figure patches, nor could it sure be such a sin to paint. So she's talking about making up. So women would only make up. Nobody would become a housewife if you could always become beautiful. But alas, and this is the most important line again, since frail decay beauty must decay, curled or uncurled, since locks will turn to gray, right? So whether you want or whatever your hair be like, it will turn to gray. Now it's quite amazing in C. When I read this poem in my first class, I was at probably your age, exactly in your age probably, and I had a head full of curly hair, and I could not believe that one day it would turn gray and in fact vanish. But now that I realize the impact of Clarissa's speech, when my hair is graying, thinning, and vanishing, that is what Clarissa is pointing out. Since frail beauty must decay, curled or uncurled, since locks will turn to gray. Since painted or not painted, all shall fade. So, however beautiful you might be, in 20 years' time, all that might fade. And she who scorns a man must die a maid. That is the crux of Clarissa's message. She who scorns a man, she who does not use the beauty to trap a man into marriage, will die a maid. So, in a sense, Clarissa is very clever in that sense. She's suggesting that beauty and good sense must be used by the woman when there is time to enter into a marital relationship. What then remains? Well, our power to use. So remember, in an earlier segment, we had talked about the softer power of the woman, of the feminine, right? And keep good humor still, whatever we lose. And trust me, dear, good humor can prevail when airs and flights and screams and scolding fail. So Clarissa is rebuking Belinda. She's telling her that, putting on airs, screaming, or fighting will not help you to gain control over the man. You need good sense and you need good humor. Now here, let me point out Pope's epistle to a lady. What does Pope have to say? Pope says, she who never answers until a husband cools, or if she rules him, never shows the rules. So how does a woman gain power over her husband? Not by screaming or dictating to him, according to Pope, of course. This is rather misogynistic, but very cleverly, by apparently submitting to him, charms by accepting, by submitting sways. So it is by her submission that she very cleverly controls the man, yet has her humor most when she obeys. She retains her good sense and good humor, Pope says, but it is only then that she can control and manipulate the man. So Pope is, as it were, advising the ladies how to control the man, and through Clarissa, therefore Clarissa is in that sense Pope's mouthpiece, that you cannot control a man by screaming or fighting. You can only control him by apparently submitting, retaining good sense. And keep good humor still, what then remains but well our power to use. And keep good humor still, whatever we lose. So beauty is lost, but good humor can still retain our power. And trust me, dear, good humor can prevail when airs and fights and screams and scolding fail. Beauty is in vain, their pretty eyes may roll. Charms strike the sight, but merit wins the soul. So in the end, the man is much more moved by merit and docility. So in a sense, Clarissa is an extremely important agent of patriarchy. Right. Remember that not all men are patriarchal. Men is not equal to patriarchy. Patriarchy is a mode of behavior. And Clarissa becomes an agent. She asks the woman to be docile, to be submissive, so that she can ultimately manipulate the man. So in a sense, Clarissa is not suggesting that you submit only. She's suggesting that you take good sense, you take good humor, and then manipulate the man into your ways. Don't fight with him. So is Clarissa a simple agent of patriarchy who suggests that the woman should submit to the man? Or is she a very devious and cunning kind of a woman who is suggesting that by apparently submitting and retaining good nature, the woman may manipulate the man according to her convenience? This is the critical question. So spake the dame, but no applause ensued. Belinda frowned. Thalestris called her prude. Now, there's one thing that you must remember, that a prude is associated with the gnome, and prudery is associated with naughtiness, with mischief. And Clarissa has already created mischief in the sense that she has handed the Baron the scissors to cut off Belinda's lock of hair. So is she teaching Belinda a lesson? Is she creating a situation where Belinda is forced to acknowledge that, and trying to show all women in that sense that merely screaming or creating a conflict will not work. Remember Pope's first epistle to Arabella Fermor, where his aim is to talk to the younger ladies about their follies. So the satire on women is operative here, where the woman is being told how to win the heart of a man and by submission control him. So in a certain sense, this poem is a deeply patriarchal poem where the agency of the woman, or the woman, is never treated as an equal of the man, but she can win a degree of power only through submission. So there are three versions of womanhood which are being offered here. The first is the version of a coquettish woman who flirts, who radiates her sexuality. But this version of womanhood creates a kind of chaos in society. She's the femme fatale who creates wars and epic confrontations in society. This is the femme fatale, the flirtatious woman, the sexual woman. The second is the Amazonian woman and the hysterical woman, right, who is marked by instability, rage, grief. And this also creates chaos in society. It only generates much self-pity, but it does not create any kind of a solution. Pope is therefore foregrounding a third idea of womanhood, and that is passive womanhood, where the woman is submitting, and it is only through her submission that she can wrest a degree of control. So three versions of womanhood that Pope is offering, and Clarissa becomes a spokesperson for patriarchy and the idea of passive womanhood, which Pope seeks to establish. Please remember something. Why should you read The Rape of the Lock today? Not because of a quarrel that happened in 1711, but because we have to see how patriarchy constructs various versions of womanhood and how passive womanhood is the version that it seeks to impose. Right. Anyways, so spake the dame, but no applause ensued. Belinda frowned, Thalestris called her prude. And then the battle begins. So this was the speech of Sarpedon to Glaucus and Patroclus, and now we have the epic battle between Belinda and between the men and the women. So the battle between the Greeks and the Trojans is now transformed into a mock heroic battle between the men and the women. To arms, the fierce virago cries, swift and lightning to the combat flies, all sides in parties and begin the attack. And so instead of swords and instead of shields, what do you have? It is replaced by fans clapping, silks rustling, and tough whalebones. Whalebones, once again, used in those petticoats, if you remember. Crack. Heroes and heroines' shouts confusedly rise, and bass and treble voices strike the sky. So instead of the epic screams of battle, what do you have? You have the cacophony of men and women in a prolonged state of conflict. Like gods, they fight and not dread a mortal wound. So when bold Homer makes the gods engage and heavenly breasts with human passions rage, remember again that the gods fought with the men in the battles of windy Troy. So against Pallas, Mars, Latona, Hermes arms, and all Olympus, the house of the gods, rings with loud alarms. So it's a divine fight, as it were, that is happening, an epic, sublime fight, which is now once again trivialized and feminized, that it is the women who are fighting the men in a trivial, courtly, social brawl. Jove's thunder roars, heaven trembles, blue Neptune storms, Neptune being the god of the sea, the bellowing deeps resound. So in all the elements, the battle is taking place, just as in the way Pope has invoked all the elements for the sylphs, the gnomes, the salamanders, and so on and so forth. Earth shakes and nodding towers, the ground gives way. So Pope is comparing this trivial battle to a doomsday battle, to the end of the world battle, as it were, thereby highlighting both the mock heroic laughter, the comedy, as well as creating the feminine world of Belinda's epic. Triumphant Umbriel on a scone's height, this is the comedy, on a scone's height, a cake as it were, clapped his glad wings and sat to view the fight. Front on the bodkin spears, the sprites survey the growing combat or assist the fray. And then, you see, what will now happen is that this fight will be comically dissolved into laughter. Pope has created an epic battle scene. But this being the mock epic, that battle will have to be dismissed into laughter, one. And secondly, it will have to be feminized, right? So how does he do that? How does he release the laughter as well as create a feminine world? So, and though the press enraged Thalestris flies and scatters death from both her eyes, a bew and a wittling perished in the throng, one died in metaphor and one in song. O cruel nymph, a living death I bear, cried dapper wit, and sunk beneath his chair. So how does the woman kill? The woman kills with her eyes, with her glances. And Pope is invoking the Petrarchan tradition, where in the woman's love, but in the Petrarchan love sonnet, what you have already studied, the man has a living death in love. So in love, the man dies every second. And therefore, Pope suggests that the woman can kill with her glance, and that characters like Dapper Wit and Sir Fopling Flutter, whom we find in Etheridge and Wycherley's plays, all die when they have this glance of the woman. Please remember that there is a sexual punning here also. Dying means to have an orgasm, right? Therefore, dying has a sexual metaphor as well. So, a mournful glance of fopling upwards cast, those eyes are made so killing was his last. So Pope is invoking the Petrarchan tradition where the lover is, as it were, possessing a living death while loving the woman. So when Beau Sir Plume had drawn Clarissa down, Clo stepped in and killed him with a frown. Clo is a friend and maid. She smiled to see the doughty hero slain, but at her smile the bew revived again. Now this is a delightful, comic, mock-heroic passage. Clo kills the man with a frown. The girl kills the man with a frown. And when she laughs at him, he is revived again. You see, what Pope is doing is the serious military metaphor. Once having been invoked, Pope is dissolving it into laughter and sexuality, as it were. Now Jove suspends his golden scales in air, weighs the men's wits against the ladies' hair. Please remember that there is always a sexual punning here. The hair that is referred to obviously is the pubic hair, and the mounting of the man is obviously a reference to his erection. Therefore, the doubtful beam long nods from side to side. At length the wits mount up and the hairs subside. Once again, you can see the sexual innuendo here. See fierce Belinda on the barren fly. So this is the epic climactic battle with more than usual lightning in her eyes. But this bold lord with man who sought no more on his foe to die. You see, what does the Baron want? The Baron wants to possess Belinda and die on her. as it were, sexually die on her. Right. Therefore, you can see how Pope is, within the tension of the battle, tightly creating a mock heroic dissolution of laughter. And also, he is creating, I would say, and suggest, a certain sexual punning on the female body. But this bold lord with manly strength endued, once again, a reference to his, once again, erect manhood, as it were, she with one figure and a thumb subdued, once again referring to a masturbatory practice. So the woman can subdue the man with a finger and a thumb. Now, what I want you once again to notice is the pervasive sexual innuendo that runs through these battles. The battle, Pope suggests, is a sexual battle for control over the body, where the man wants to die on the woman, and where the woman can control the man through one thumb and a finger. And then comes another very comic message or comic passage. So where the breath of life his nostrils drew, a charge of snuff the wily virgin threw. The gnomes direct to every atom just the pungent grains of titillating dust. So instead of swords and shields, what you have is snuff being thrown and sneezes being performed. So instead of the performative, epic, violent, bloody battle, you have a battle where the ultimate result is sneezes. Sudden with starting eyes, each eye overflows, and the high dome re-echoes to his nose. Now meet thy fate, incensed Belinda cried, and drew a deadly bodkin from her side. Now the bodkin is a long, blunt needle used for sewing. Now, what happens is, in the epic, there are passages where the lineage of a weapon is often discussed. For example, in Homer, Agamemnon's scepter, how it came to be formed, or say Arthur's sword, King Arthur's sword, how it was delivered. So the sword has a lineage by itself. Therefore, what Pope does is he mock heroically parodies that lineage of the weapon, transforming it into the bodkin or the needle. So where did this bodkin come from? So the parallel is to Agamemnon's scepter, right? And its gradual mutation through the ages, how it came to Agamemnon. The parallel is to Belinda's bodkin, right? So once again, a mock heroic passage. The same in parenthesis, in brackets. The same is ancient personage to deck. A great grandsire wore about his neck in 3 seal rings, and then infant grandame's whistle, the bells she jingled, the whistle blew, and then comes the bodkin graced her mother's hair. So it was first a ring, a necklace around the great-grandfather, then on her grandmother a whistle, then it was transformed into a bodkin and a hair clip, and finally it has reached Belinda, right, which long she wore and now Belinda wears. So the lineage, it is passed from ancestor to ancestor and then to Belinda. So this lineage of Agamemnon's scepter is now transformed into Belinda's bodkin. Boast not my fall, he cried, insulting foe. Thou by some other shall be laid as low, nor think to die dejects my lofty mind. All that I dread is leaving you behind. Restore the lock, she cries, and all around. Restore the lock, the vaulted roofs rebound. Now you have this climax done. The battle is taking place and raging, and the claim is that the lock should be restored. And when Pope talks about Belinda, he now refers to Shakespeare. Nor fierce Othello in so loud a strain rode for the handkerchief that caused his pain. You will remember that in Othello, Shakespeare's play, Othello's entire pain is caused by Desdemona's handkerchief. The handkerchief, by the way, was a symbol of sexual favors. So the pain of Othello is now compared with the pain of Belinda at having lost her hair. So what has Pope done? Pope has now created this epic framework where we have an epic battle raging with epic weapons, and where the confrontation is at its peak. The problem now remains, how does one resolve it? How does one solve this issue so that Lord Peter's ego is satisfied, as well as Belinda is mollified? How does a resolution take place? This is something that Pope has to determine. Right. So the lock obtained and with guilt and kept with pain in every place is sought, but sought in vain. So the lock vanishes. So the lock is the bone of contention. If the Lord Peter keeps it, he possesses Belinda by default. If Belinda takes it back, then Lord Peter has lost. So Pope suggests that the lock has vanished. When such a prize no mortal must be blessed, so heaven decrees, with heaven who can contest. So Pope now transforms it into a heavenly sublime sphere. It is lost to the heaven. How is it lost? Since some thought it mounted to the lunar sphere. The lunar sphere is the moon, where since all things lost on earth are treasured there. Now this refers to Ariosto's Orlando Furioso, where Astolfo turns to the moon, travels to the moon, where he finds everything that is rejected on the earth. So think about this, that in Orlando Furioso, the moon is the place where everything is kept after the world, after its life in the world. So it is searched in the moon, but it is not found there. Since their heroes' wits are kept in ponderous vases and views in snuff boxes and tweezered cases, their broken vows and deathbed arms are found, and lovers' hearts with ends of riband bound. So this is once again from Orlando Furioso, where Ariosto writes that the moon consists of a mighty mass of things strangely confused, that on earth were lost or were abused. So just as everything is kept in the moon, so also, Pope suggests that every trivial thing is also kept on the moon. So this is another mock heroic passage, as it were. The smiles of harlots, the tears of heirs, cages for gnats and chains to yoke a flea, dried butterflies and tomes of casuistry. And then comes the most important conclusion. This is another very important part of the poem. So, but mark, trust the muse. She saw it upward rise. So it is the poet who ultimately traces the lock, where it has gone. Though marked by none but quick poetic eyes. So Rome's great founder to the heavens withdrew, to Proculus alone confessed in view. The reference is to Ovid's Metamorphoses here, right? To Ovid's Metamorphoses. In Ovid's Metamorphoses, Romulus, who is the founder of Rome, appeared to Julius Proculus. So this is the Proculus that is being referred to, and confessed that he was ascending to heaven, right? And he was to be sacrificed to as a god. So just as Romulus announced to Proculus alone that he was ascending to heaven, similarly, the lock has ascended to heaven only followed by the poet. বুঝতে পারছো? Just as Romulus ascended to heaven and showed it only to Proculus. Similarly, the Lock ascends to heaven and is seen only by the poet. A sudden star. So what has happened is a parallel to Catullus's poem on Berenice's hair. Catullus's poem on Berenice, which we have seen referred to earlier, suggests that Berenice's lost hair is now transformed into a star. এটাকে কি বলে জানো? This is what is called deus ex machina. D-E-U-X, deus ex, E-X, machina, M-A-C-H-I-N-A. What happened in the classical dramas was very often that when something could not be resolved, the gods would ascend in a chariot to resolve. মানে নাটকে যখন আর শেষ খুঁজে পাওয়া যাচ্ছে না, you cannot resolve something, then a chariot would be lowered, a god would be lowered from up, and he would solve the conundrum. He would solve the problem. So deus ex machina, something which is given from above, right, which is not mortal any longer. So the entire solution is transformative, beyond the pale of the human reason into the world of the imagination, where the gods intervene. Deus ex machina is where the gods intervene. And this is where the gods intervene to transform it to a star. What is transformed into a star? Belinda's hair, right? So a sudden star, it shot through liquid air and drew behind a radiant trail of hair. So just, you'll remember that, the term comet is actually drawn from the Greek word for hair. So like a comet, you remember Halley's comet, the lock of hair is transformed into a star with a radiant tail, right? Therefore, it flies through the atmosphere as a star. It is sublimated into a star. Not Berenice's lock first rose so bright, the heavens bespangling with disheveled light. The sylph beholds it kindling as it flies, and pleased pursue its progress through the skies. So this is what happens to Belinda's lock. It goes neither to Belinda, not to Lord Peter, but it transformed into a star. Now, what is this star? This, the beau monde, right? This, the young men and women shall from the mall survey. So they will look at it from the mall, the fashionable city center, and hail with music its propitious ray. This, the blessed lover, shall for Venus take. So this will be taken as the pole star Venus, and send up vows from Rosamunda's lake. This Partridge was an astronomer who was rather discredited, soon shall view in cloudless skies, when next he looks through Galileo's eyes. Galileo's eyes is the telescope. So Partridge will look at it through the telescope. The fate of Lois and hence the egregious wizard shall foredoom. The egregious wizard is the astrologer who sees the star and sort of foretells the future. Then sees bright nymph to moan thy ravished hair. So this is ultimately the conclusion of the poem. Pope tells Belinda, sees nymph to moan thy ravished hair. Stop this social brawl, which adds new glory to the shining sphere, right? It has been transformed into a star. Not all the tresses that fair head can boast shall draw such envy as the lock you lost. So the lock has been transformed into a star. What more could you want? For after all the murders of your eye, so after you've killed so many men with your glances, when after millions slain, once again an exaggeration, when you flirted with millions of men, you yourself shall die, when those fair suns shall set, when age will catch up on you, as set they must, and all those tresses shall be laid in dust. So from dust you come, and to the dust you shall return. And then comes a very clinching line. So far you've said that this is the deus ex machina, where divine intervention has happened and the lock has been transformed into a star to remain in eternity, rather than be a physical lock of hair which will mutate, which will change, which will be destroyed. It has become an eternal star which will remain forever. And then comes the clinching line. This lock, the muse shall consecrate to fame. So what is this star? This star is ultimately not a real star at all. This star is the star that the muse has consecrated to fame, that the muse has created. So this star is what the poet has created. Therefore, what is this star? The star is really the poem. Amidst the stars, inscribe Belinda's name. So what Pope has done is, instead of the beauty of Belinda's hair, in the final sleight of hand, in the final transformation, he says, Belinda, your lock of hair has become a star, and it will be eternally beautiful. But what is that star? That star is my poem, which will remain forever. Now this, of course, you have seen. In your earlier paper, you read your Sydney, Astrophel and Stella. And you see, what happens in Sydney is that Sydney suggests that the woman is the star, the transformative, sublime star, and Astrophel is the stargazer, the lover. But how is the beauty of that woman preserved? In bright ink, thy fame shall shine bright. Remember your lines? So ultimately, it is through the poetry of the poet that Stella becomes a star. So it is the poet who can transform the woman's beauty into eternity. Now, this is a classic Elizabethan gambit, poetic gambit. Sidney uses it. Shakespeare uses it also. In Shakespeare's poems, in sonnets, you'll remember Shakespeare talking about, time and the scythe of time and the beauty of the beloved remaining eternal, but through the poetry of the poet. And it is used also by Spenser, especially in the Amoretti sonnets. The Amoretti, will remember, this was a series of sonnets dedicated to Elizabeth Boyle. And and Spenser writes that his lady's name will be preserved in his verse. Not so, could I, let baser things devise, and I'm quoting from Spenser, to die in dust, but you shall live by fame. Pope is using the exact same strategy. My verse your ventures rare shall eternize. So the opposition is between the temporality of Belinda's beauty versus the eternity of the poem's celebration of Belinda's lock of hair. And in the heavens write your glorious name. So this transformative sublimity is breathed into the poem by the poet. The poem is the ultimate star which will preserve Belinda's fame. So Pope has thereby satisfied what he has set out to do in the epistle dedicatory to Arabella Ferber, to resolve the parties out of a conflict. He suggested that neither the Baron can possess the lock of hair, nor can Belinda, because it becomes a star. Belinda's beauty is no longer ephemeral but eternal. But ultimately, it is the poet who has done this. It is the poet who has transformed Belinda, or completely sublimated Belinda's beauty into the star, which is the poem. So ultimately, Belinda lives on as you and I are reading the poem through the lock of hair, and it is thereby transformed. The social brawl is resolved, and Pope has also, in a way of patriarchy, sort of delivered a moral message to Belinda that her beauty is fragile and will decay, and ultimately she should surrender to patriarchy and seek whatever control she can within the structure of patriarchy itself. In the process, Pope has also talked about the beauty of Belinda. He's talked about the richness of Belinda's world and the colonial riches that strew her table. He has validated the beauty of colonialism through the beauty of Belinda, and thereby, through Belinda's body, the British nation's body has been celebrated. Pope has therefore followed or written this poem. The immediate occasion for writing was a social brawl. Pope's aim was to resolve this conflict, the ulterior suggestion being that Belinda can resolve this conflict herself by surrendering to Lord Peter in marriage. If not, then Belinda's beauty is preserved in eternity, becomes a star through the poem. Pope has taken an epic framework, very often using Ovid and Homer, and is suggested that this battle is actually the battle between the Greeks and the Trojans, the battle between men and women, and he has trivialized it into a social conflict. However, he has transformed it into entirely the feminine world of Belinda, the masculine world of the epic into the feminine world of Belinda and a dressing table, and he's also breathed in great beauty and comedy and thereby aestheticized it. So Pope's art is an art of substitution and transformation. Now, what Dryden did in Macfechno was largely, as you can see, Juvenalian. He was substituting and ridiculing, so that the satirical pungence was dominant. He was substituting the monarch for the dunce, Shadwell. And in this gap between the sublime and the ridiculous lay the laughter and the ridicule. Pope does not do that. Pope creates a gap between the sublime war and the trivial incident. But even within the trivial incident, he breathes in great beauty, laughter, and a degree of sublimity, of great beauty of Belinda, whereby this poem becomes a combination of satire against the woman, satire against the aristocracy, but simultaneously it is marked by laughter, beauty, sublimity, and in general the laughter is much more tolerant rather than ridiculous. Pope seems to half admire Belinda's world rather than dismiss it completely, like Dryden was doing in Macfechno. It is thus, you see, that through the 5 cantos, Pope has created, out of a social quarrel, a mock heroic poem of great beauty, and in Canto 5, he has resolved it through the Deus ex machina and has claimed sublimity for his own poem. Generally, mock heroics do not claim sublimity. They languish in the ridiculous. But in this case, Pope has created a poem that is so beautiful that he suggests that Belinda's lock of hair will remain forever beautiful through the poem that he has created. This is how the poem therefore closes. Right. It is with that that I am stopping the screen share, and I am also stopping the recording. Just give me a moment.